morning that next Tuesday they're going to open their store here. So, I mean, they are in an entire, what I call it, an entirely new part of town to the west side of town that used to just be, a farmer's field, just like Fargo was, 15, 20 years ago, where it just expanded and expanded and expanded. We're doing the same thing here. And we wouldn't be doing that without the oil. Watford City it's going to need $193 million. They said this last June. The city of Watford City is going to need $193 million to make the improvements to infrastructure that they need to sustain the amount of people that are there because of oil. The legislature is going to have to help cities like Dickinson and Watford City with those funds and funding for those capital improvements, for those infrastructure improvements. That funding doesn't happen if the oil slows down.
Now, and that's, I think, something that you could say. I mean, even if you just look at some of the spending the state has already done. I mean, we're just coming off the legislature just plotted a course for the next biennium, the 2013-2015 biennium, that if we hit everything the way they've budgeted for, we're going to have a 62% increase in spending over the 2011-2013 biennium. How do we do that spending if we slow down the oil boom and suddenly, the oil revenues that are enabling that spending disappear? I mean, we've grown spending a lot. I mean, that's just one biennium. We could go back several bienniums and talk about this huge increase in spending. If those revenue disappears, it seems like the state's going to be up a creek.
Well, it might be, and it might not be, but the stance is that everybody wants their piece of the pie, and it's not just this part of the state, it's the eastern part of the state, too, that everybody wants their piece of the pie from this oil boom. Well, the pieces of the pie get awful small with the less money that comes in. And, obviously we're not in that situation right now. I mean, oil production in North Dakota has never been higher. Thankfully, some of, like we put in our editorial board, a lot of these counties they actually have fewer rigs than they did in May of 2012 when it was at its peak. Dunn County, which is north of us here, and we're in Stark County. Dunn County is right north of us. That's Killdeer. That's where they're really tapping into the Three Forks formation. Well, that's the area that they're also starting to use more. They're starting to put more wells on a drilling pad, so less rig movement, less rigs. So they're actually finding more environmentally sound ways to do this. The whole issue, it seems, that now, especially in the last month or so, that has crept up is transporting that oil. But the catch-22 of it is, if we don't improve infrastructure around here, how are we going to transport that oil? We can't even, it's not like the train. It's not like the trains go right up to the rig pads and right up to where the wells are.
Right, and that's sort of the catch-22 as well, is that we're saying slow it down because the infrastructure can't handle it, but also, at least as far as public infrastructure is concerned, and obviously the railroads aren't necessarily public infrastructure, but at least as far as the public, the roads and things like that are concerned, if we slow down, that's going to mean a slowdown in revenues. It's also going to mean our ability to build out that infrastructure is not going to be there.
Exactly.
You had a great passage. I want to quote this. It's for those of you who haven't, and I would recommend people to find this editorial. It's on the Dickinson Press website because I thought it was just great. But let me read this quote. It says, "Though there are many days when it seems like life in western North Dakota does indeed need to slow down, we forget why there are so many new people in our area. Most come from states where the economy had faltered, something that could very well have happened here if not for the oil industry. Calls to slow down or moderate how oil is extracted from western North Dakota seems like a great idea until the consequences are brought up." And then you go on and you say, "Free enterprise, infrastructure, and the real estate markets are all catching up in the oil patch. Why slow down just when things are beginning to balance out and life is beginning to stabilize?" Is that, I mean, it kind of seems like what you're saying is that we've already hit the peak and now we're sort of maybe on our way back down to a more manageable, a more normal pace. Why, this almost seems like these calls to slow it down are too little too late.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't say too little too late. It's just that, like I said, now we are just starting to finally catch up. And the people around here are just starting to figure it out. It takes time. This started really in 2008 up in Williston. It didn't hit us really hard until about 2010, 2011. But now it's really starting to catch up. The one city that, and I go through there a few times, I try to go through there once a month. I try to get up there once a month. And it is Watford City. That's the city that's having, a lot of problems. But boy, they're even catching up. And I had a buddy who used to work in the oil field business. He worked for a company. He didn't work for an oil company. He worked for an oil service company, so a company that serviced rigs, things like that. He hadn't been to Watford City for about 4 months. He drove up there the other day, and he texted me, and he said, "Holy cow, has that place changed?" And I said, "It changes every month." And, it's a city that there's unlimited potential. I don't think there's anybody in their right mind who would have thought that Watford City would ever grow at the pace that it is now. And while they understand that it's all because of the oil, they've embraced it. They understand that they're going to have a migratory population of some sorts, but they're trying to build their city so that some of those people want to stay there. They've got a new grocery store, the new big cash prize grocery store, probably the nicest grocery store in western North Dakota right now. It's brand new. In that same facility, they've got all these little shops. It's like a mini mall attached to it. So basically, Watford City now has a mall. Who would have thought about that 5 years ago? They've got 2 big, brand-new hotels that are just beautiful, and Main Street is lively there, and they have their problems, yes. But, I was up there and I stopped and talked to a couple people, including Gene Veter, the economic development director, and he even said it too. They're starting to catch up, but this summer is going to be very interesting for them because their population will swing back up to, he estimated, about 14,000 people. The city 5 years ago was 1,500 people. So just imagine that, and just imagine, you have to deal with that. You have to build your infrastructure for that. You add all these new businesses, and imagine if it just goes away overnight. And what happens to that city? People lose their money. People lose everything at that point.
Your sense of how things are going in Dickinson is my sense living in Minot, which I think is kind of in the same position maybe Dickinson is a little bit on the edge of things and certainly feeling the impacts, is that we're finally starting to get our head above water. We're finally starting to get to a point where we can project some things and we can figure out how to handle this influx of humanity and commerce and everything else that's coming our way. Let me ask you if this sounds right, because this is something that I've written and it's something that I believe is that instead of saying, well, let's slow down the oil boom to something we can manage, it seems to me that the question, because there are questions to ask, there are questions about rail safety and highway safety, and the highway safety. These are not new debates, but there are questions that are out there, and it seems to me that the debate we should be having is what's holding us back from keeping up with the growth? What's stopping us from doing these things, and then addressing those problems instead of saying, well, let's slow down the oil boom with regulations. Do you think that's a healthier outlook?
Oh, I think it is. It's a great question to ask, and I think the answer is simply infrastructure and highways. It's as simple as that. When Dickinson improved Highway 22, we expanded it from 2 lanes to 4 lanes and a turning lane all the way north to the Stark-Dunn County line, which is about 4 or 5 miles. That whole area is industrial. It's basically one big industrial park, all that stretch of oil companies, construction companies, agriculture service companies. There's homes out there now too. But when we did that, accidents went down. Just life improved in general for the people that live in that area, simply because they added more stoplights. They widened that road so nice. And then that road is going to tie in with the interstate bypass that they're building. They're going to build that new interstate overpass on exit 59, which is right now, doesn't exist. It's going to start being constructed this year. When they build that, it's going to alleviate traffic a little bit more. When they build that Watford City bypass, that's going to alleviate traffic even more. The more we improve our infrastructure as far as roads is concerned in this part of the state, the better off we're going to be out here. That's my personal feeling on it.
Dustin, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, Rob. Anytime.
That's Dustin Monke, managing editor of the Dickinson Press. I advise you, go pick up this editorial. I thought it was great, the Dickinson Press website, and they produce some great coverage of the things going on in the oil patch from the ground, which is just great. I'm Rob Port, sitting in for Mike Capel. Last segment coming up. If you want to weigh in, 701-293-9000, 888-970-9329. We'll be back right after this. Don't go away.